Hi, it's Matt from Hive, and today I'm here with Rohan to talk to Rohan about his recent journey back to New Zealand. Rohan's a senior associate power engineer, and he's just returned to Christchurch after spending a few years working in the US and in the UK. And today we're just going to have a chat about Rohan's journey. In terms of your journey, what would you consider were the kind of biggest challenges and considerations when you were looking at your relocation from the US, UK back to New Zealand?
Yeah, so I think in terms of the day-to-day work, one of the biggest changes is kind of readjusting to the type of work we do in New Zealand. So This is one of the things I noticed when I moved overseas, is that there was a lot less focus kind of on the commercial aspects of the projects, working in an engineering role in Europe. And now that I've returned, I'm having a lot more exposure to that kind of stuff again. So it's sort of getting used to being a bit more of a jack of all trades compared to when I was working overseas. That's one of the big ones. But yeah, I think that's probably the main one.
So Rohan, what would you describe as, do you think, some of the biggest differences that you've seen between Europe and New Zealand in terms of the technical framework, the regulatory framework, the focus of the work that you're doing?
So I think I'm an electrical engineer, and a lot of the standards we use are international, so that's been really good.
Yes.
So in the power industry, we use a lot of IEEE and IEC standards, and that's kind of the same no matter where you work. But coming back to New Zealand, there are kind of other like governing bodies that do have some documents you need to be kind of familiar with. So one is the EEA. They have, so I've just come across this in the last couple of days. There's been a safety and design guidance document that that is included in some of the contracts my new employer has. So getting familiar with that. And then of course, since I left, the health and safety legislation has been updated. So I think Work Safe New Zealand have a lot of good material if you need to get up to speed on the Health and Safety at Work Act. So that's, I guess, in terms of the technical standards. In terms of like the culture, I think, I touched on before about the sort of being a jack of all trades, but
is that just in the context that you have to work more broadly?
Yeah, exactly. But it's still early days for me. I've only been back at work 4 weeks. So, still trying to get my head around things here, but I think in terms of the work culture, it's been pretty similar. Like the employer I'm with now is very flexible in terms of like working from home or working different, like time shifted hours and that kind of thing. So I think that varies by employer, which is probably pretty similar to overseas as well. I haven't found too many other differences. I think like culturally, it's pretty similar to the UK, just more of a broader scope.
Interesting. And those regulations that the things that are different, there's still a strong degree of similarity about them, so people should be able to get up to speed on those reasonably comfortably.
A lot of, like, particularly in electrical, like it's a lot more about just understanding the project and understanding technically what needs to happen, and the regulation side of thing is sort of if you know good practice from around the country, it's going to pretty much be transferable, and you can always ask questions of your colleagues if you're not quite familiar, and they'll point you in the right direction. So I think it's been a pretty smooth transition so far. I'm not expecting that to change too much. And I think in certain areas, and again, it depends on what your employer, and it depends on if you're working like for a consultancy or contractor. It depends on the client. In some areas, they might be more mature than Europe, and other areas they might be behind. So it can really vary a lot. I'm just looking at the moment the requirements around BIM or computer-aided design, and from my previous experience, it seems like my previous employer in Europe was actually a bit further ahead in that particular area, but then there's other areas that they were lagging behind. So it's it can vary depending on what you're talking about.
Great. So in terms of preparing for your relocation to New Zealand, what sort of steps, what were the kind of key things that you had to look at and prepare for the transition from Europe back to New Zealand?
Yeah, so good one to talk a little bit about is my chartership. So when I originally moved to the UK, I kind of had a feeling that one day I would end up back in New Zealand, but at the same time I wanted to develop myself in the UK environment. So I actually went through the process to transfer my chartership to the UK.
Yes.
And around the same time, I also renewed my chartership in New Zealand. So I kept that current while I was working over there.
Yes.
And I think that helped make me look like a good candidate to
Yes.
employers over here. But I would say, if you've got chartership in the UK, or even in another country, I think you can transfer that to New Zealand. Like that, these organisations don't do that often. I think when I did it was like the first time they'd done it in a couple of years, but it is possible. So that can be one way you can prepare to sort of make yourself more attractive to potential employers. We were in a situation where my wife and I planned our kind of timing with the transport and getting things shipped back quite early. So that meant that when we got back here, our stuff was here waiting for us. So I think if you're thinking about relocating and you want to look at shipping your personal belongings, then get that sorted like well in advance.
Yes. So in terms of the industry in New Zealand, what do you see as the big opportunities, do you think, that are kind of on the horizon from a work perspective, and how engineers might be able to contribute to those?
Yeah, sure. I mean, in the power industry at the moment, there's more than enough work to go around. There's not enough people for the amount of work that's in the pipeline, and that's because of things like electrification and all the old assets that need replacing. So there's plenty of opportunity, and I think all of the big employers are they seem to be always interested to talk to people. There seems to be shortages across the industry and all the different kind of sub areas of power engineering.
So lots of work to be done. So part of it's about upgrading the existing assets, and the other part's kind of preparing for the future demand, and that changes around renewables and green grids, and lots of work to be done. And just kind of in conclusion there, what do you think would be the kind of key advice you'd give to engineers that are looking to make the transition to New Zealand and to the power sector?
I think two kind of key things that I learned or realised along the way. One is that it's a big move moving countries. I've done it twice this year, and you need to make sure that you've allowed enough time for when you arrive to actually do all the life admin that you'll need to do when you arrive. Right. So I think I was originally planning 2 weeks, and I extended that to I think 5 weeks. And in that time, we had to buy a car, find a place to live, and sort out the rental. We had our container load of stuff arrive, and we needed to unpack that, and then we had a whole lot of things we needed to buy, like a bed and appliances, and a whole lot of other stuff that we hadn't shipped from the US. And all of that takes time, and then you may want a little bit of extra time after that to just rest before you start. So I think there's plenty of opportunities, and there's actually a good chance that you will be able to secure a job before you move. But just make sure if you do that you're giving yourself enough time to get settled, so that you're and make sure you've got enough savings to live off during that time, so that you're not feeling the sort of monetary pressure. And that will just make everything a bit easier. And then the other kind of key bit of advice I would say is, if you're moving to a new place, you need to think too about and if you've got a partner as well, think about their experience, and just in terms of settling into a new city and meeting new people, new friends, all that kind of stuff. The situation I'm in is I'm originally from here, but my partner isn't, so I need to think about that and make sure she's feeling comfortable.
Time to build those social networks and feel part of the community.
And supporting her through that.
Great advice. And the $1 million question, I suppose, Rohan, how did you find the whole experience of dealing myself and dealing with Talent Hive and the people here there around supporting you into that new role and your transition?
Really good, actually. I think the way that I connected with you was a little bit unusual. My brother had suggested that I talk to a family friend who works in the industry, so I set up a call with him. This is when I was in London, and he put me in touch with you. And then I found you to be really flexible in terms of the times for calls, because it's managing that time difference between Europe and New Zealand is always a bit of a challenge. So the flexibility there was really good, and also I found that you were really patient because I was exploring kind of multiple opportunities with different people, and you were really patient and understanding. But then I think also you challenged me to kind of consider some options that I had maybe wrote off prematurely. So that was really good as well. And you know, you supported me through the setting up the in-person meetings with the two sort of companies that I was interested in, to help me decide between which ones to choose, and that was really helpful. So I think overall it's been a really great experience. So, really appreciate your help.
Thanks for your feedback, and I'm glad it all worked out to a successful conclusion. So, and thanks for your time today as well.
You're welcome.
That's great.
Hope it helps some people out there.
Yes, yeah.